Welcome to the Night Files. In this video, you'll hear a story about hiking alone, where one wrong turn leads to something terrifying. Take out your earphones, close your eyes, and let your imagination walk deep into the woods. But be warned, what you're about to hear might follow you even after the story ends. I've hiked more trails than I can count, and I've seen my share of wild things. But this was different. I still can't sleep when the wind howls. I still keep my bedroom light on. It all started last fall when I took a solo trip to Windmere Ridge in North Carolina. It wasn't on any of the major trail apps, just an old map I found in a ranger station's discard pile. That should have been my first warning, but I'd been craving something remote, something untouched. The morning I arrived, it was dead quiet. No other cars at the trailhead, no ranger, just fog rolling low like a creeping tide and a battered wooden sign. Windmere Ridge, trail status, unmaintained. Proceed at own risk. I smiled. That was exactly what I wanted. The first few hours were peaceful, leaves crunching under my boots, mist rising off the ground, not a soul in sight. Then, around mile 5, I found the tree. It stood out immediately, maybe 15 feet tall, twisted and bleached white. No leaves. The bark looked smooth, almost fleshy. I walked closer and saw tiny claw marks covering it, spiraling upward. At the base was a small pile of bones. Birds, squirrels, maybe a raccoon. All perfectly clean. No bite marks. No signs of decay. Just stripped. I stood there too long, trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed the woods had gone silent. No birds. No rustling. Nothing. A cold pressure slid up my spine like a wet rope. I took a photo with my phone, though I can't find it now, and moved on, fast. I hiked 2 more miles before setting up camp near a creek. I didn't think much about the tree until just after midnight. I woke up to a sound. Not an animal, not a branch. It was a voice, whispering. Close, right outside my tent. It said my name, Caleb. I froze. My blood turned to ice. No one knew I was out there. I barely remembered passing the turnoff that led to the ridge. But that voice, it was soft, high-pitched, and wrong, like someone imitating a person badly. I didn't move. I held my breath. Then the zipper twitched, just a little. Then again, slowly, I reached for the knife I kept beside me. But before I could do anything, it stopped. The whisper faded into the trees. No footsteps, just silence. I stayed up the rest of the night with the knife in my hand, eyes wide. In the morning, I found 3 perfect claw marks on the outside of the tent flap. Not scratches, not cuts, burned into the nylon. I packed up in 10 minutes and started hiking out. Every few minutes I'd stop, thinking I heard twigs snapping behind me. At one point, I turned fast and swore I saw something move behind a tree, tall, thin and pale, but it was gone before I could focus. Then, I got back to that white tree. Only now, there was a fresh set of bones. And something new beside the pile. A small bundle of sticks tied together with shoelaces, my shoelaces. From my backup pair, the ones in the side pocket of my bag. I hadn't even noticed they were gone. I ran, all the way back to the trailhead. When I got in my car, I found the back seat door cracked open. I hadn't left it that way. And on the seat was the bundle of sticks. Same one. Same laces. I burned it that night in a pit behind my apartment. 3 weeks later, I started hearing scratching under my bed at night. I haven't hiked since. I've always hiked alone. Something about the silence, the rawness, it clears my mind. I'm cautious, I prepare, I research. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found at Echo Pines. I was chasing waterfalls, literally. There's a hidden one deep in the Cascades, way off the main trail. A ranger had once mentioned it in passing, said it had no official name. But the locals called it Dead Echo Falls. That should have been my first red flag. It took me 7 hours to reach the area. I bushwhacked through ferns, climbed slick rock, and finally stood before a narrow gorge. Water thundered down a jagged cliffside, vanishing into a misty black pool. It was breathtaking and dead silent. I turned to set up camp when I saw something in the water. A man, standing waist deep under the waterfall, completely still, staring straight at me. I shouted, thinking maybe he needed help. He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. And then, without moving his mouth, he smiled. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I blinked, and he was gone. No ripples, no sound, just the waterfall crashing down. I told myself I imagined it, that the mist and exhaustion were messing with me. But when I walked down to the pool, I found wet footprints leading away from the water toward my camp. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard splashing, loud, frantic. I peeked out from the tent and saw a shadow thrashing in the pool, something fighting, clawing at the rocks like it was drowning. I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted to the edge. There was nothing, just black, unmoving water. I turned to go back and stopped cold. My tent was gone, not collapsed, not ripped, just gone. The clearing was empty. Only thing left was my journal, open to a blank page, scrawled across it in soaking wet ink. You found me. Now stay. I ran without thinking. No trail, no bearings. Just running through trees like a hunted animal. I didn't stop until sunrise. Somehow, I ended up back at the trailhead, covered in cuts and soaked to the bone. When I returned 2 days later with the search team, there was no gorge, no waterfall, nothing. Just flat forest floor undisturbed. But the weirdest part? On the logbook at the ranger station, under my name, someone had signed in after me. Same pen, same handwriting. Naomi Reyes. I live in the city now. I haven't touched my gear in months. I can still hear water dripping behind me when I sleep. I'm a survivalist. Former Army. I don't scare easy. But I've never talked about what happened that winter on Sugar Bend because no one would believe me. It was January. I'd planned a 3-day solo in the Rockies to test some new cold weather gear. I snowshoed in from the south entrance, deep into the forest. No trails, just markers and memory. By the second day, a blizzard hit hard and fast. Visibility went to 0. I found a rock overhang and dug in for the night, planning to wait it out. That night, I heard knocking. Not wind, not branches. Knocking. 3 slow, solid thumps. I waited, thinking it had to be a tree shaking in the storm. Then it came again, closer this time. I turned my flashlight on and scanned the dark. Nothing. In the morning, the storm had passed, but I was disoriented. GPS was glitching, compass spinning like mad. That's when I saw smoke rising between the trees. I followed it, hoping someone had a fire or shelter. That's when I found the cabin. It looked old, logs blackened by time, roofs sagging, windows fogged over. But there was a warm glow inside. No trail led to it. No path. No prints in the snow. Just the cabin, sitting alone, as if it had grown from the earth. I knocked. No answer. I stepped inside. It was warm. A fire crackled. There was food on the table, hot stew, steaming mugs. But no one was there. Then I noticed the photos on the wall. Hundreds of them. Polaroids. Tacked up like wallpaper. All of them were of me. Sleeping, eating, walking in the snow. From angles I couldn't imagine. Some from inches away. My heart stopped. Then the door slammed behind me. I spun, knife out, but no one was there. The photos on the wall were changing. I watched, in real time, as new ones appeared. Me, standing in the cabin. Me, looking at the wall. Me, with wide, terrified eyes. Then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, raspy. Behind me. I turned. Nothing. But one last photo slid from the ceiling. Me, lying on the floor, eyes wide open. Blood across my face. I ran. I didn't care about gear or direction. I just ran. It took me 2 days to find a ranger patrol. When I told them what I saw, they looked confused. "There's no cabin out there," one of them said. "There hasn't been since the '92 fire." I didn't argue. I just left. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I smell that stew. And I keep finding Polaroids of myself, tucked in drawers, slid under doors, and I live alone. I took the job because it paid well, not because I loved the outdoors or craved solitude. I just needed money fast. So when the Forestry Service said they were looking for a last-minute Firewatch volunteer for Elk Spine Ridge, I said yes without thinking. No radio contact after 6 p.m. "That's just how it is out there," said the man during orientation. Odd, but I didn't ask questions. The tower was a 3-hour hike from the drop-off point. Lonely, battered by weather, and built in the 1960s. I was supposed to stay there for 2 weeks, watching for wildfires, logging observations, and checking the weather sensors. The tower stood alone on a ridge above an uncharted valley the locals called Hollow Bend. I asked the ranger about the name. He just grunted and said, "Don't look too long into it." Great. The first night was uneventful, quiet, save for the whisper of wind against the glass. But around 2 a.m., I woke to a metallic humming. It was faint, like distant electricity buzzing through bone. I looked out the window and froze. There was a light in the valley, a pale, pulsing glow, way too large to be a flashlight, way too quiet to be a vehicle. It throbbed like a heartbeat, then disappeared. I told myself it was lightning. I told myself a lot of things. The next morning, I checked the valley with binoculars. That's when I saw the trail. It hadn't been there yesterday. A narrow path snaking into Hollow Bend from the east side. It looked man-made, too clean. I called in, but the radio gave only static. Hours later, it crackled back to life, except all I could hear was breathing, like someone was pressed against the mic. I shut it off. But that night, the light returned, and I realized it was getting closer. The third night, I gave up pretending I wasn't scared. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The light in the valley now hovered at the tree line, never coming further, never retreating, just pulsing, I watched it for hours through the scope. At one point, I saw something move within it. A shape, tall, bent, and twitching, as if it didn't understand how legs worked. My hand was trembling. The binoculars fogged from my breath. When I pulled them away, I gasped. The light was gone, but there was a figure at the base of the tower. It didn't move. It didn't look up. It just stood there. I bolted the trapdoor and didn't sleep. At sunrise, it was gone. I climbed down with a hatchet. Yes, stupid, but it felt better than nothing. There were footprints in the frost. Not human. Too long. No heel. Like hooves, but wrong, split, and dragging. The prints didn't come from the forest. They came from the earth itself. I swear they started in a perfect circle of blackened soil that hadn't been there before. I went back up. The air inside the tower was sour, like old meat. And on the wall, someone had scratched into the paint. The eye doesn't blink. It waits. I didn't scratch it. No one else should have been here. That evening, the trail vanished, and the light climbed halfway up the hill. It was only 100 feet from the tower now. That night, I heard whispers in the wood. On day 5, I tried to leave. I packed my gear and set off down the path, only to walk for 4 hours and somehow end up back at the tower. No matter which direction I chose, I looped. It was like Hollow Bend had rewritten space around me. I lost my mind a little that night, screamed into the trees, threw the radio off the railing. I was pacing, ranting when I realized there was a 4th window. It was on the east wall. There were only supposed to be 3 windows. I had memorized the schematics. I had even cleaned the windows on the first day. But now, on the east wall, was a 4th, rectangular, covered with grime, frosted on the outside, and behind it, a silhouette, tall, still, facing in. I backed up slowly, grabbed the axe, turned. The window was gone, just smooth wooden wall. But later, when I checked the security feed on the tower's laptop, there it was, frame 33 at 2 hours 12 minutes and 14 seconds. A 4th window, and something inside the room with me, not moving, just standing there, its head tilted, almost curious. When I froze the frame, the image flickered like a corrupted video file. And suddenly, every window in the tower went pitch black, like something was pressed against them from the outside. Then knocking, on all sides, rhythmic, measured, intelligent, and from the ceiling came footsteps. I don't remember passing out. I just woke up on the floor, soaked in sweat. Day 6. The valley was dead silent. Birds, bugs, wind, all gone. I decided to burn the tower. I poured lamp oil around the floor, took out my emergency flare. My hand hesitated just for a second, and then the trapdoor opened. All by itself. Something was climbing up. I saw fingers, long, pale, segmented like insect legs. They gripped the wood with slow purpose. Then an arm, bent backward, elbow first. I screamed and lit the flare. The room exploded in red light. The thing recoiled, screaming in a voice that sounded like mine, twisted and wrong. I tossed the flare. Fire ate the floor in seconds. I jumped through the window and rolled down the ridge. The tower burned behind me, black smoke rising into a sky that had turned an unnatural shade of violet gray. I ran for hours, passed out in a drainage culvert. When I woke, I was in a hospital. They found me a mile from the highway, raving about a 4th window. The rangers said the tower was struck by lightning. Said they'd never assigned anyone to that ridge this season. Said the valley was off limits since 1981. Said I was the only one who ever came back. But that's not true. Last week, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo. Me, in the Firewatch Tower, taken from the fourth window. I live in a city now. Steel walls, no trees, no silence. And every night, I wake at exactly 2:12 a.m. to see the light pulsing outside my window. I love hiking, always have, but this one changed me. It was supposed to be a solo getaway. I had just quit my job, broken up with my girlfriend, and needed something quiet, grounding. So I picked a remote section of the Cascade Wilderness. Hard to reach, harder to navigate. Exactly what I needed. I planned a 3-day hike, off-trail, deep into the northern ridges. I told my buddy Chris I'd check in via sat phone each night. That was the plan. Day 1 was fine. Dense pine trees, mossy earth, and that crisp alpine air. I didn't see a soul all day. Set up camp near a glacial stream. But that night, I heard something outside my tent. Not an animal, not wind. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, and deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard, but failing anyway. I held my breath. The steps stopped just outside the nylon wall. I could see the shadow through the fabric, tall, hunched, and twitching. Then it scraped something along the tent. A finger? A branch? I didn't know. And then it whispered, "Not your forest." I sat there paralyzed until dawn. When I unzipped the tent, nothing was there. No prints, no sign. I packed up and kept moving, too stubborn to admit I was scared. Around noon, I found a trail. That was strange. I had intentionally mapped my route to avoid human paths. But this one, it looked ancient, overgrown, nearly swallowed by the forest, but unmistakably man-made. A line of black stones ran down the middle. I should have turned around. Instead, I followed it. For hours. At some point, I realized the light had changed. The forest was darker, even though it was only 3 p.m. The trees grew too close, leaning toward the path like they were eavesdropping. There were no sounds, not even wind. The trail dipped into a narrow gorge, and I saw a doorway. Yes, a doorway, freestanding, made of rotting timber and lashed with vines. Just standing there in the middle of the trail like a gate to nowhere. It had symbols carved into it. Sharp, swirling patterns that made my skin itch just looking at them. And written across the top beam, in English, "Only the dead exit." I laughed nervously and stepped through it. Immediately I felt wrong, like the gravity shifted, like I'd entered somewhere I shouldn't have. The air was thicker. The trail behind me was gone, just trees now. I turned in a slow circle and saw carvings on every trunk around me. Eyes. Hundreds of them. Some open, some stitched shut, all carved deep and dripping with sap like blood. I started running. Didn't care which direction. That's when I heard the bell. A soft, clinking chime, far off but getting closer. It rang in threes. Every time it sounded, I felt like something inside me got a little colder. Then I saw her. A girl, maybe 12 years old, standing barefoot in the middle of the woods. Pale skin, long black hair, and eyes that were too wide, too still. She didn't blink. "Help me," she said monotone. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. She turned and pointed into the trees. "They follow the bell." I backed away. "Who?" She said one word. "The hollowed." I turned and ran again. Branches tore at my face. Roots caught my boots. I kept hearing the bell. 3 chimes. Then silence. Then closer. Eventually, I burst into a clearing, a ring of scorched earth with a stone altar in the middle. Tied to the altar was a man. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot and mouth gagged. He was alive. Before I could move, the bell rang again. This time, right behind me. I turned and saw them. For figures, tall, gaunt, their faces missing as if scooped out. No eyes, no nose, no lips. Just smooth hollows where features should have been. Their heads tilted in perfect sync. They moved without sound, stepping toward the altar. One extended a rusted knife. I screamed and lunged forward, trying to untie the man, but the ropes were too tight. He started shaking his head violently, not begging for help, but warning me to run. I looked into his eyes. He was already gone. The hollowed lifted the knife and plunged it into his chest. The man didn't bleed. Instead, from the wound, black smoke poured out, whistling as it coiled into the air like it was being siphoned. The hollowed inhaled it. I stumbled back, fell, crawled away as they stood still, smoke curling from their hollow faces. The bell rang one last time. Everything went dark. I woke up in a ranger cabin. Chris was there. So were 2 paramedics. They said I was found wandering barefoot and incoherent on a service road, 10 miles from my last known location. I'd been missing for 4 days. I told them everything. They chalked it up to dehydration and trauma. But 2 things still don't make sense. 1, the boots I was wearing when they found me weren't mine. They were 20 years old, cracked and brittle. And inside them were bones, small toe bones, like they'd grown inside. 2, in my backpack, I found a black stone. Perfectly smooth, perfectly round, carved with a single symbol. An eye stitched shut. I keep it in a drawer now, far from my bed. But sometimes at night, I still hear the bell. 3 chimes, then silence, then something moving toward my door.